so we have our sample question that says determine parallel, perpendicular, and either. Remember, this is multiple choice. But we want to make sure that you get this right. So your first step is look at your lines, see if y is by itself. Okay? None of the questions up here have y by itself. So we're going to have to solve for the specified variable y. Take the first line, 6x plus 2y equals 6. Remember, underline the y, because we want to get y by itself. That's the only thing that gets to stay. Everything else needs to move or divorce. So anything that's added to the underline, see how the 6x is added to the underlined y? That has to move. Anything added or subtracted. So since the 6x has to move, I do the additive inverse. So I look at the front of 6x, not behind it. So the positive 6x, so the opposite would be a negative 6x. That makes them inverses. Remember the move step. Whatever you do to the left, we have to do the same thing to the right. So these will cancel out because they're inverses, and then we're left with positive 2y. Notice I brought down the plus sign just to help me remember that you should always bring this sign down. If it's negative, you have to. So I always do it when it's a plus as well. Over here, that's a constant. That's a variable with a coefficient. So you cannot combine these. These are not the same. Constant, coefficient, variable. So always put the variable term first. And I told you put the constant term last. Now since the constant's a positive 6, make sure you put a plus sign. Separates it from the variable. Now how do I get rid of the 2? Remember, this is multiplied. It's a coefficient. It's smushed together. So the divorcing step says you divide not only by the number, but its sign. So I'm going to divide this by positive 2. And I'm going to divide each of these items on this side of the equation by positive 2. Remember, because this is separate from this, I have to divide both of them. These cancel out, so I get y. Negative 6x divided by positive 2. Luckily that goes in there evenly, and I get negative 3, and the x on the side. And then 6 divided by 2, that also gives me a 3. So now that y is by itself, remember, it had to be by itself, then we know that this is the coefficient of x, which makes that the slope. So slope 1 is m equals negative 3. Okay. Now let's grab the second equation, and we'll try to squeeze it in there. Let me see if I can grab a different color marker, maybe that will help determine, see it better. X minus 3y equals 15. Okay, so notice y is not by itself, so we need to get the letter y by itself. Notice this x is subtracted to the underline. Since it's subtracted, we need to move this. See how I circle it to kind of help me know that I'm going to move? Because I want to do the opposite of what x is. Not that it was subtraction, the opposite of what x is. This is a positive x, so the opposite would be subtract x on both sides. They cancel out. Make sure you bring down this subtraction sign. So it's going to be negative 3y. Subtract 3y. And then here, constant, variable, cannot smush. So you have to put the negative x first. This is a constant, so put it as plus 15. Don't write it as like a coefficient. Don't try to make this negative 15x or 14x. You got to have a variable and a constant, because this is a variable and that's a constant. Then get rid of the coefficient. How? We want y by itself, so I'm going to divide not only by the 3, but the sign as well. Because there's two pieces here, divide each one by negative 3. This and this cancel out and gives us a positive y. Now remember, if you don't see a number here, remember how many times I said slip in a 1 as the coefficient? Negative divided by negative is going to be a positive. 1 divided by 3, that gives us 0.33333 if you put it in your calculator. So make sure you keep it as a fraction instead. 1 over 3. You can't reduce this because 1 you can't break down any further, and 3, you can't break down any further, so they can't cancel out. The x, just push it to the side because it's on top. And then positive divided by negative, you're going to get a negative 5. So then we can see by y being by itself, we can clearly see the coefficient of x is our slope now. M equals positive 1/3. Now that I have the slope for the first and the slope for the second, compare. Are these identical, -3 and a positive 1/3? No, they're not the same. Once you see one's negative and one's positive, that automatically does not make them identical. So I know they're not parallel. Let's multiply the two slopes. We have a 3, and we have a -3 and a positive 1/3. Now since this is not a fraction and this is a fraction, put it over 1 so that we have two fractions. We know we do top number was top number. So 3 times 1 is 3. Bottom number was bottom number. 1 times 3 is 3. And then negative times a positive gives us a negative. Now remember, 3 over 3, you can reduce that. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we get -1. Remember, if we get -1, then our answer is going to be perpendicular. We definitely know it's not parallel. Because remember, we told you to be parallel, they have to be identical. So as soon as you have one negative and one positive, you definitely can't say parallel. We told you multiply. If that answer is -1, which we got, then we say it's perpendicular. Or what you could have done is just look. Do you have opposite sides? And are they reciprocal of each other? One's a negative, one's a positive, so they're definitely opposite signs. And then what's the reciprocal of 3? Remember, 3 over 1, the reciprocal would be 1/3. So then yes, that's the reason why this one is perpendicular. If this came out to be a different answer, like -2, +5, then we would have said neither, because these technically would not be reciprocal of each other.